begin today at the Mishnah on Daf Nun Beis, Amud Beis, in the bottom of the Amud. Zok Heilige Mishnah, Hametame, if someone takes a truma, let's say, that belonged to a Kayin, and he makes it Tameh. So now he makes it Tameh, the Kayin can't eat his truma anymore. So this is a major loss. V'hamedame, or he takes truma and he mixes it together with chulin. Not necessarily truma that belonged to a Kayin, but someone had truma, and he has chulin and he mixes them together. So it's also a big loss, because the chulin could be sold for its proper value, but now what happens once it's mixed with the truma? You can't anymore use it, you can't eat it, the Yisrael can't eat it, he can sell it, but he can only sell it to a Kayin. So he's going to have to sell it for a cheaper value because only the Kayin is going to buy it. V'hamenasech, or you take someone's wine and you pour it for Avodah Zarah. This is something which the Gemara will explain more specifically what it's referring to. So now if any of this is done b'shoigeg, then potter. If this is done unintentionally, without the intention to actually cause this loss, so then you potter. But b'meizid, if it's done intentionally to cause this loss, chayiv. So then you chayiv to pay for the damage and for the loss caused there. This is, all these examples here, as we'll see in the Sugya of the Gemara, is what's known hezek she'ein niker. When you cause a damage, but physically you can't see anything in the item that was damaged here. And there'll be an argument in the Gemara, but the maskan of the Gemara is hezek she'ein niker minat Torah, you're not chayiv to pay for this, and it's just a knas midrabanan that you have to pay for this. And the Mishnah is saying that the knas only applies b'mezid and it does not apply b'shoigeg. That's the pshat of here in the Mishnah.
Why is potter?
Why is he potter? Potter does not mean that it's mutter, that you're allowed to go and be mazik someone in this way. It's definitely also to be mazik, but nevertheless, the chiyuv to pay for a hezek, which is learned out from psukim in the Torah, and all those examples that the psukim speaks about to pay, it talks about a hezek nicker. So from that we understand that the Torah demands the payment for a hezek only by hezek nicker. Hezek she'ein nicker, there's no chiyuv to pay. The isra though to be mazik, of course there's an isra to be mazik in such a case. But there's a big discussion about it, but that's a simple pshat here. Itmar, so we learned the following machlokes regarding the last example of the Mishnah, menasech. When it says in the Mishnah, the case of menasech for wine. Rav says menasech mamish. That menasech means literally menasech, which is what's called yayin nesach, when wine is poured for Avodah Zarah. So Rashi actually says that the way this Avodah Zarah, of menasech is done, is not necessarily that the wine is poured, but the person stirs the wine with his hands, l'shem Avodah Zarah, and that's this Avodah of Avodah Zarah, and that makes the wine asal bahana. So that's the meaning of menasech. In other words, Rav is translating the Mishnah literally.
Stirring is menasech?
Yeah, that's what Rashi says. I'm teaching you again, but Rashi says menasech means shich biyodeh, stirring it. Yeah.
What otherwise?
Again, what?
You can do it the different ways.
One second. This is going to be relevant for the pshat of the Gemara. That's why I'm saying it. Shmuel Amar, but Shmuel says a different pshat. Ma'arif. When the Mishnah here says menasech, it doesn't mean literally menasech that it's being poured or stirred for Avodah Zarah, but rather he mixed wine, which was kosher wine, together with wine of Avodah Zarah. And that's the problem here. Basically, similar to the other case before this, medam, when he mixes the chulin and the truma. So over here it also means ma'arif. So the Gemara explains, mandama ma'arif, Shmuel, that says that the Mishnah means that he was mixing. He mixed this wine with kosher wine. My time menasech. Why did he not want to teach the Mishnah literally that it means menasech, that it was poured for Avodah Zarah? Amalach, I'll answer you, menasech. If the Mishnah was talking about a menasech, so then kamli b'derabimine. You can't say that it would be chayiv to pay for the damage, because in such a case he's chayiv skila for the Avodah Zarah. And there's a halacha of kamli b'derabimine. Once the person is chayiv miseh, you don't pay for damages. You don't pay any money. So therefore that can't be the case of our Mishnah. So therefore he said ma'arif. So the Gemara explains v'idoch. So according to Rav, how would he answer this? Why is he chayiv to pay? Answer is Kid Rabbi Yirmiyah. He explains the pshat like Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, Mishas agbo hudekana. From when he picked up this barrel of wine, he picked it up to steal it, to take it for himself. So he already acquired it. And from that moment, he's a gazlan, he's chayiv to pay. This chayiv benafshoy lahavat shas nisoch. At what point does he become chayiv misa for the Avodah Zarah of menasech? That's only at the time of the nisuch, at the time that he's pouring it. So therefore, if it's not exactly at the same time, there is no kamle b'derabimne. You chayiv for the payment before, and then you chayiv for the misa for the nisuch that comes after. Okay, so there's Mefarshim here explain that according to Rashi, what the Gemara is saying is Rav learned Menasech that he stirred the wine, so he didn't even pick it up b'chlal. And in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah it says that was the usual way of nisuch. Nisuch was not necessarily pouring, but it's just stirring the wine. So therefore, there's no picking up. So as you put in your hand and you stir the wine, at the same moment is the tashlumin. You're damaging it, and there's also the Avodah Zarah. So if it's at the same moment, Rav says that's kam lebe derab minei. But that's Shmuel. Sorry, Shmuel says kam lebe derab minei. But Rav says no. Over here, what's the menasech we're talking about? Not stirring it, but he poured it. In order to pour it, he has to first pick it up, and then he pours it. So therefore, there's no. Therefore, there is no kam lebe derab minei. It's at two different times. That's one pshat in the Gemara according to Rashi. There is another pshat in the Gemara over here that Taisva speaks about, Parichas, what the pshat in this Indian is. Taisva says that according to Shmuel, you can't apply here to what Rabbi Yirmiyah says, that you separate picking it up and then pouring it because you're picking it up in order to pour. So it's considered to be like one big action, like one thing. So therefore there still is kamle b'derabmene. Even though there's a second apart, but you pick it up to pour, kamle b'derabmene still applies. Okay, so this...
That second is chayiv misa?
So it's going to be chayiv misa, so there's no chiyuv for the payment. Now the Gemara continues, Laman doma menasech. So now Ravs that said that the pshat of the Mishnah is literally menasech. My time loy omar ma'arif. Why did he not want to explain like Shmuel that the Mishnah menasech means ma'arif, that he mixed this wine with the kosher wine? So the answer is because if so, haina medama. It's the exact same thing as the case of medama. That when you're mixing chulin and truma, why would the Mishnah say two cases which are basically the same idea? But Shmuel will answer you. Knasahu. Over here, the whole payment for this damage is only a knas, as I mentioned before, because it's hezek shein and ikar. Only knasa lo yalfinon. And when there's a knas, we can't compare one case to another case to say that the knas applies in both cases, even if they're mamish basically identical. Because it's possible that Chachamim instituted and applied the knas here and not here. So therefore, the Mishnah has to say that the knas of the Chachamim was in both, for medame and menasach, which according to him means ma'arif. Says the Gemara, Olaman, the Yalav Knasa Miknasa. So apparently Rav disagrees with this. Rav holds that you could learn out one Knas from another. And therefore Rav holds it's not necessary for the Mishnah to say Ma'arav and Medama. So according to Rav, that once we see Chachamim give a Knas for one case of a Hezek Shein and Nikir, so you can learn out that the Knas applies in any other kind of damage that's similar. So Kol Hani Lamali. Why do I need these three cases in the Mishnah, which are all three examples of a damage, which is a hezek, shein, and nikir? Why does the Mishnah have to tell me all three examples? So the Gemara explains, tzriche, they all three have to be said. Because the tana metame, if we would only say the first case when you metame, someone's trome, so trome, if we're talking taka about trome, you metame the trome of a kayin, hava mina, I would say, you know why the Chachamim applied their knas here? Mishum the kamafsud lo legamri. Because you're ruining this completely. Once you're metameh, the kohen can't eat it, can't do anything with it. Or actually, we are going to see soon that a kohen could still use it to give it to eat to his animals, or he could use it as like fuel or for firewood and so on. But the Gemara here considers it to be mafsud legamri because truma is really made to eat and he can't eat it anymore. So therefore, Chachamim applied their knas. Yeah, correct. And if we're talking about you metameh someone's chulin. But still, there would be a reason Dafki here Chachamim apply their knas mishum the asa ligrim tumah l'chulin sheberetz Yisrael, because it is a iser midrabanan that you're not allowed to cause any tumah in Eretz Yisrael for anything, even for chulin. And the reason is because many people in that time were careful to eat chulin betara, to eat even chulin with purity, and therefore in Eretz Yisrael there's an iser to cause this tumah. So you will aver on this iser. So therefore we can understand that here Chachamim apply their knas that you have to pay for this. But when you mix chulin with truma, so you weren't over any isser when you do that, and you also didn't destroy it completely, it still could be sold for a cheaper price. Maybe here there's no knas for this. So that's what the Mishnah says, the knas for medama as well. On the other hand, medama, if we would say the knas regarding medama when you mix chulin with truma, I would say over here mishum the shchiach, because this is something that would be more common to happen. Chachamim applied their knas. Avol metame the loy shchiach, but to be metame someone's truma or cholim, which is not so common, and like we just said, it's an isser. So this is not something that a person would do. So Eimeloi, maybe Chachamim did not apply the knaser. As the rule always is, Chachamim do not apply their takonis in a case where it's not shchiach. Now, if the Mishnah would tell me that the knas applies to both of these cases, metame and medame, I would tell you, mishum delei kimlei b'derabba minei. In both of these cases, you chayiv to pay because you're not chayiv any other punishment of misa, so there's no possibility of kimlei b'derabba minei, so you have to pay. Aval menasech, the kimlei b'derabba minei, but by menasech, according to Rav, menasech is actual avodah zarah, so you chayiv misa for this, so you shouldn't be chayiv to pay. You shouldn't have to pay. Kamash Malan, Kid Rabbi Yirmiyah. So our Mishnah is teaching me that you have to pay, and the reason is, like we said before, from Rabbi Yirmiyah, because the time when you stole it, which is the payment that you chayiv for, and the time that you chayiv misa for are not exactly the same time. That's the pshat and why the Mishnah says all three cases. Now the Gemara goes through a similar discussion in the order of the way this is presented in a Braisa. It says the Gemara, Olaha, the Tani Yavu, the Rabavin. So the father of Rabavin, so he taught in the Braisa as follows. In the beginning they said, Hametame v'hamenasech, that if you metame someone's the food, or if you menasech f'avodah zarah. So he put the order differently. Medame is last. Menasech comes before. So metame and menasech, those were the two that Chachamim applied their knas for. Then Chazru Loima, the Chachamim came around and added as well that Afa Medame, that Medame you also chayiv. So Kolhani Lamali. The question is, why do we need all these three? Once it says Metame, and then it says Menasech. So Menasech already teaches me that even in a case where it could be Kamle B'derabim Minei, nevertheless Chachamim apply their knas. So what is the chiddush when it adds afterwards Medame? That's how Rashi explains what the Gemara is asking here. Although it's not so simple, but that's a simple taicher. So the Gemara explains as follows. Tzriche. I need to have the cases in this Braisa, in the order of the Braisa as follows. If we would only say the case of metame, mishum delay kim libederabim minei, I would say there's a knas here because there's no kom libederabim minei, as we explained before. Avol menasech, the kim libederabim minei, since it's avodah zarah, so there's kom libederabim minei, ein maloi, I would say you potter. So that's the chiddush of menasech. On the other hand, menasech, if we would say only menasech yechayev, I would say the reason is mishum the komafsud leila gamri. Once the wine becomes avodah zarah, it's a complete loss. You could do nothing with it. No eating, no hana, nothing. But if you metame trome, or even trome cholin, or even trome, dolei mafsed leila gamri. It's not a complete loss, even though the Gemara before said it is. But over here, in contrast to the menasech, it's not a complete loss. Why not? Because as I mentioned before, the truma, even after it's tame, it could be used to give as feed for the animals, or for fuel for a fire. So it's not an absolute loss. Maybe over here Chachamim did not apply their knas. If we would say these two, if we would say the metame and menasech, then I would say mishum the hefsed merubah. In both of these cases, the loss is a very big loss. Not exactly the same level of loss, but in both of them it's a very big loss. Avol medame the hefsed muat. But by medame, when you're mixing chulin with trumeh, where the loss is much less, the loss is that you'll have to sell it for a cheaper price. Maybe here the Chachamim's knas should not apply. And tzriche, and that's why, as the Braisa says, that later on Chachamim added that even for medame, the knas still applies, that you have to pay for this. Okay, so that's the pshat in all cases of the Mishnah. Now here, the Gemara is going to bring the source of this whole entire concept of hezek she'enei niker. And this was actually a machlekes. What's the halacha with hezek she'enei niker? So Chizki said as follows: Dvar Torah, regarding these cases in the Mishnah. So min ha-Torah echad shegeg ve'echad mezid. Both if it was done unintentionally. Unintentionally over here doesn't mean that it just happened by accident. Unintentionally over here means he did it on purpose, but not with the intention to damage it. He didn't realize that he's damaging over here his friend's things. Or ve'echad mezid, or whether it was done intentionally to damage, chayiv. Either way, min ha-Torah, he should be chayiv for this. So basically, so it's Gemara explains here. Let's see. My timer, what's the reason for what Chizki is saying? Because he holds hezek she'enei niker shmei hezek. When you damage someone's property or someone's items in this way, even though you don't notice the damage physically, nevertheless, it's just like any other damage, and you're chayiv to pay. Now, ma tam omru b'shegig potter. So why does the Mishnah here say that b'shegig you'll be potted for paying? The answer is Kidei Sheyediyah. In order for this person that did this unintentionally should let him know about this damage that happened. What this means is that if you're going to obligate him to pay, he's going to say to himself, the owner has no idea about what happened. He doesn't realize it's Tameh. He doesn't realize what happened over here. So if he doesn't realize, let me not tell him, so I won't have to pay. But if we are going to say that he's potter to pay, so then he'll let him know, this is Tameh. Be careful, don't eat it. So we want to prevent an Isser from the Kayin of eating Trumah, or from a person having a Noah from Yain Nesach, from Avodah Zarah, and so on. So therefore, they patted him in order to be Mediyah him. So this is a Takana Midrabanan. This is Bechlal, this Mishnah here comes into this Pedic here, because it's a continuation of all the other Mishnayos that discusses Tikkun Olam. And according to Chizkiah, the Tikkun Olam over here is that if you're not going to pater him when it's b'sheigig, then he's going to come to eat it. You have to let him know. Fragt the Gemara, but if that's the case, afilu b'meizid nami. So b'meizid as well, he should be pater in order that he should let him know about the hezek that he just did here. And says the Gemara, hashte izuki kamachaven, aidule meidile. He did this with his whole intention was to be masakim, that he should not be able to use it. That was his whole intention. So you're concerned that he might not let him know about this. If he's not going to let him know about it, then his whole intention will not be fulfilled. He's doing it only in order that he should know that it's tamei, or know that it's avodah zarah, or know that it's mixed, that he should not be able to use. Of course he's going to let him know. So we don't have to make a special takana that he should be potter from paying, that he should be interested in letting him know about this. This is Chizkiah. So the basis of Chizkiah's opinion is that hezek shein and nikar, shmei hezek, that you're for this. Rabbi Yechanan Amar, however, Rabbi Yechanan says, Dvar Teire, Minat Teire, Echad Shegig, Vechad Mezid, whether it was done unintentionally or intentionally, potter. Should be potter for this. Because, as Gemara will explain, my time, what's the reason? Because Hezek, Shein and Niker, Loishme Hezek. Because since it's a damage, which you can't see any physical damage here, Minat Teire, you're not chayiv for this. Ma Tam Omru B'mezid chayiv. So if so, why B'mezid are you chayiv? Shelo Yehei, Kol Echad Vechad, Hoylech, Metamet, Hareis, Shachavere. So that a person shouldn't go ahead and be metame all the things that of a person's food and things that are pure. And he'll say, look, I'm potter. So this is a knas midrabanan. That's the pshat in our Mishnah. So the Gemara is going to bring from different places to try to prove which opinion here is right. So Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, HaKayanim shepiglu b'mikdash. Kayanim are doing the Aveda of the Karbanis, the Beis HaMikdash, and they had a machshava that makes it piggle. Right? The machshava that makes it piggle is, for example, they shechted or spray the blood, and they had a machshava that this is going to be eaten shaloi bizmanai, out of the time that it's supposed to, whether a day and a night or 2 days and a night. So then the carbon becomes puzzle. So the owner now has a major loss. He spent money on this animal to bring it as a carbon, and now he's going to have to bring again a carbon. So mizidim, like again, what?
Just a thought like that?
Yeah, b'pashtus it's a thought. Yeah. So b'mikdash, in the Beis HaMikdash, mizidim, if this was done intentionally, chayavim, they'll be chayiv to pay for the loss to the owner. V'tani Allah, now in a Braisa we learned on this, why are they chayiv mipnei tikkun olam? In order to rectify matters in the world. If you're going to say that they're potter, so then any kain can easily, if he has any fight with this yid that brings this carbon, he can do this to cause this loss. Says the Gemara, Navi Yamret Hezek Sheini Nikashmei Hezek. If you're going to say like Chizkiah said, that Minat Teire, when you do a Hezek, even though there's nothing noticeable, you still chayiv. So hi, Shegig Petura Mipnein Tikkun Olam Mibayale. So in the Braisa, it should explain not that Tikkun Olam is that you should be chayiv for the b'mezid. You chayiv Minat Teire for the mezid. The Tikkun Olam, according to Chizkiah, is that Chachamim came and pattered the person b'shegig because they want him to notify about the hezek that he did. Over here, he should notify about the pickle that he caused, that he has to bring a new carbon. That's what the Braisa should have said. So the Gemara answers, Hachanami Ka'amar. That's how you have to understand this Braisa according to Chizkiah. That it said in the Mishnah, Mezid and Chayavim, that B'mezid Yechayiv. So you understand from this, Shegig and Peturim, but if it was done unintentionally, so then you potter. And the reason the Braisa says is Mipnei Tikkun Olam. The reason you potter is Tikkun Olam, so that the Kayin should notify about this damage that he did. So there's no rai from here against Chizkiah. Basav Rabbi Lazar asks the Shaila, Ha'ise Melocha B'mei Chatas. If one goes and does work with the waters that are used for the Chatas, and the Chatas we're talking about over here is for the Paraduma, or a Beparas Chatas, or the Paraduma itself that's going to be used for the Paraduma, you went and did work with it. So this both by both of them, whether the water is used for something or the para is used for work, it makes it possible now to be used for the para aduma. So you just caused a loss here. Pater midine adam, but nevertheless you're going to be pater for paying for this loss midine adam v'chai b'dine shemayim. B'dine shemayim, the Eibishter will give you the punishment you deserve for this. If you'll say, like Chizkiah, that this is a damage, even though you don't notice anything physically, but it's a damage. So b'dinei adam nami lechayev. So even in b'dinei adam in a bezdin, you should also be chayev to pay for this. This was Rabbi Elazar's question. So who ma'isiv la, who mefarik la? Rabbi Elazar asked this question, and he himself gave the answer, and explained as follows. That basically, before I read the answer inside, the point of the answer here is going to be that not only is this a hezek shein and nicker, but in this case, the hezek happened in such a way that you did not do directly a physical action to cause the hezek. The hezek happened through your machshava. So therefore, it's a grama. It's being caused by your machshava, and therefore we know the klal that grama bin izakin. Anytime you cause a damage, you put the b'dinei adam and chayiv b'dinei shemayim. Now, what's this case of grama? So the case over here is para she'echnisa l'rivka. This is a para. This para aduma, you had it go into its pen, and why did you bring it into its pen? Al menas shetinik, in order that it should go there to nurse from its mother, and also v'tidish. But your intention was also that while it's going to go there to nurse from its mother, it's also going to thresh the grain that's on the ground. So it did work. You're using this pada that it should go and do work. But the thing is, the action that you did to bring it in that place was not just an action for the threshing. If it was only threshing, so then the very action that you're doing is an action of work, and you'll be chai for that according to Chizkiah, even though it's a hezek shein and nicker. But because it's going there also to nurse, so therefore the actual action itself, it's going there linik. The fact that b'shas ma'aseh it's also doing a disha, why you chai for that work? Because your machshava is that it should also do the threshing. So it comes out that it's not the actual action physically that's causing the hezek, but it's your machshava that's causing the hezek. So because it's your machshava, that's called a grama, and you potter for this b'dinei adam. And similar meichatos sheshakol ben mishkoles. The meichatas, the work that was done with the meichatas over here is you have a scale and you put the water of the meichatas on one side of the scale. Not just putting it there physically, the action physically is not a work with the meichatas. But the fact that you're having the machshava, that you know the weight of this water, and then against it you're going to weigh a piece of meat, let's say, it's that machshava that causes the damage. So because this is a damage that's caused by machshava, so therefore this is a grame, and that's the reason why you potter. But not because of the hezek shein and nicker. Now, based on this piece of the Gemara here, this last piece, so somebody shainim say, going back to the previous case regarding pigul, so what you brought up before, that regarding pigul, usually we think that pigul is only b'machshava. If so over there, so the Gemara could have said the same thing, that over there, it's just a grama because it's b'machshava. So what was the question? So somebody shainim say that mikan raya, that pigul is not going to be pigul with machshava alone. It has to be b'dibur. Only if a kohen b'dibur said that this carbon is going to be eaten in a time more than it's allowed, then it becomes pigul. But machshava does not become pigul.
That's the whole din of pigul, then it's not the machshava.
No, it doesn't matter though. Even if the whole din of pigul is dafke b'machshava, but machshava is always considered to be a grama. Only a maisa or a dibur is considered to be a maisa hezek. Any hezek that comes with machshava l'chayr is only considered to be a grama. Okay, the Gemara asks on this answer that we just gave here, and what did we say regarding the water? That the water was just placed on a scale, and in such a case, the Braisa said over here that if you do this, so then you potter b'dinei adam and chai b'dinei shemayim. But for Omar Rava said mei chatas, this water of the paraduma, sheshakal ben mishkoles, that you used it for weights, and seemingly it's talking about the same thing on a scale. Ksheira, this water is actually still kosher. So over here it says that there's no damage whatsoever if it's just used as a weight. You didn't really do an actual malacha with the water itself. What did you do? You took the water in a cup and you placed it on one side of the scale, and against it you're weighing something else. But you didn't do an actual malacha with the water itself, so it's still kosher. So how could you say the case over here in the previous brayso was that you put it on the weight and your machshava is causing the damage, and that's why it said there that you put the b'dinei adam but chai b'dinei shemayim for the damage that you caused, that it's going to be possible for the paraduma. Here it says it's kosher. So answers the Gemara, we're going to have to say as follows. Lo kashya, so there's no contradiction here. Ha begufan. That when it said before that you're chayav for using these waters, doing work with it as a weight or something, to weigh it, that's when you actually are using the water itself to weigh with it. And Rashi explains how could you use the water itself to weigh with it. So if you place something inside the water and you see to what level the water rises in the cup, and then you want to take something else and place it inside the water, and you can see the weight of it. You take two things: one thing that you know its weight, and another thing that you don't, and you see the level of the water rises, so you could get the weight. So you're doing the malacha with the actual water itself. Then it becomes possible to be used. But then over here, when it says that it's still kosher, is on a scale. When you just are weighing against its weight on two sides of a scale, so then it's going to be kosher. But the Gemara asks on this, but if that's the case, begufan, if you're saying that before it's talking about when you use the actual water itself to weigh with it, so then ma'isa kavod bahu. So he's doing a physical action in the water itself. So v'i hezek she'ein nikir shmei hezek, and if we say like Chizkiah that hezek she'ein nikir is a hezek, b'dinei yadam nami l'chayiv, so it should be chayiv b'dinei yadam. So this takes away the answer we said before that the hezek is only a grama because it was done b'machshava. You're saying now that it wasn't done b'machshava. You actually are using the water itself and doing a physical action to weigh with the water itself. So the Gemara answer is Ella. We're going to have to say according to Chizkiah as follows: Idi v'idi b'kenegdan. In both cases, you're only using the water on a scale to weigh against it. And there's no question over here in the two brises. The asach daite. The brisa before that says that it becomes possible for being used for the paraduma is when you masiach das from using it and keeping it for the paraduma. And here Rashi brings that it says in the pasuk that lemishmeres lemeinida that the waters that's used for the paraduma has to be kept, and there has to be a shmira for it constantly for the purpose to be used for paraduma. So over here you took your mind off of it that it should be that it was for the paraduma, and that's the hezek that's caused here. And but over here he used it, he placed it there on the scale, but the shmira that he was guarding it to be used for paraduma, he never took his mind off of that, and therefore there's no malacha done begufay, and there it's going to be still could be used for the paraduma. Masav Rav Papa, going back again to the opinion of Chizkiah. So Rav Papa asks on the opinion of Chizkiah that says that hezek she'ein nikir shmei hezek. So it says gozal matbeya v'nifsal. You stole a coin, and now v'nifsal, the government announced that this coin can't be used anymore. So the coin that you just stole, you can't just return it. You would think you can't return it as is because it has no value anymore. Or truma, you stole truma v'nitmas, and it became tummy. Chametz, you stole chametz v'aval of a Pesach, and now Pesach passed, and once a Pesach passes, this chametz becomes aser b'hana. But nevertheless, oy meloi harei shalach lefanecha. So a gazlan, v'heshiv is agzela shagazal, he has to return it, and he says to him, look, the physical item is here, and take it back as is. And he's mekayim the mitzvah he has to return it. But if you're going to say that when there's no damage, even though it's unnoticeable, but this is a hezek, it's a real loss, and you have to pay for that. Hi, gazlan. He's a gazlan, he stole it, and therefore he should have to pay the value for it, he should have to pay money. What's the halacha by a gazlan? If the item you have that you stole is here, you give back that item itself. If the item that you stole is not here, so then you have to pay the tashlumin, you have to pay for it. So over here, if you say hezek she'ein nikir shmei hezek, so then that basically means that the item is not the same anymore. What's the basis of Chizkiah's opinion? Even though you don't see the difference, but it's not the same item anymore. So therefore it's a hezek, so therefore you should have to pay for this. Okay, Taisus over here explains this more bepratius, because over here the person did not actually do any damage. The hezek she'ein nikir just happened on its own. He didn't do that damage, right? But nevertheless, Taisus says the halacha b'negei gazlan is that as long as the item is here without a shinui, you're not kained, and you just have to give back that item itself. But once you steal an item and there was a shinui cost to it, you don't give back the item itself. You're kained on the item. The gazlan is kained the item through this shinui, and now you just have to pay back money. So over here, according to Chizkiah, if you say hezek she'ein nikir shmei hezek, that should be considered to be a real shinui, and you should have to pay just real money for it, and not just give back this item itself. Says the Gemara to Yufte. This refutes Chizkiah's opinion. So clearly see over here that it is considered to be a hezek. Says the Gemara, shall we say that this machlekes regarding hezek she'ein nikir is a machlekes tanoim? The brisa says hametame, v'hamedame, v'hamenasech, the three cases of our Mishnah. So in this brisa it brings a machlekes. Echad sheigig ve'echad meizit chayiv divrei Rab Meir. Rab Meir says whether this happened unintentionally, you did it unintentionally or intentionally, either way you'll be chayiv. Divrei Rab Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says b'sheigig pater b'meizit chayiv. Like it said in our Mishnah, b'sheigig yipater and b'meizit yichayiv. So my lav b'haka miflagi. What is the explanation over here if you should be chayiv for a shegig or not? So seemingly the argument is the Mar Sovar hezek shein and nikish mei hezek. Rab Meir says that this is a real hezek minat Torah, so there's no reason to make a distinction between shegig and mezid. Minat Torah, Adam, which is mazik, is chayiv Adam muad lo'ilam. You chayiv for shegig and mezid. Omar Sovar loish mei hezek, and Rab Yehuda says that it's not minat Torah hezek, it's just a knas midrabanan, and the knas is only for a mezid and not for a shegig. No, the kul alme hezek shein nike loish hezek. Really, everybody agrees that it's not a hezek. V'hacha, over here the argument is bekansu shegig otomezid kamiflagi. Whether chachamim also extended their knas not only for a mezid but even by a shegig as well. That if a person sees that b'shegig he'd be potter for this, so then he's going to come and do it b'mezid as well. So therefore, maybe they extended the knas for the shegig and the mezid. The Mar Savar konsu shegig got the mezid. Rameh says that chachamim were stringent and extended the knas not only by a mezid but even by a shegig. Mar Savar, and Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is loy konsu shegig got the mezid. The chachamim did not make the knas for a shegig because of the knas for the mezid. So that's the machlokes over here. Okay, so now based on this, the Gemara is going to bring here a contradiction regarding this subject. Whether Chachamim go so far when they make a knas for a mezid, do they extend the knas for a shegig as well? Out of the concern that if they allow, if you don't have to pay for the shegig, then you may come to do it b'mezid. Did Chachamim extend that knas or not? So here there's a contradiction in both Rab Meir and Rab Yehuda's opinion. As I says the Gemara, V'rami, the Rab Meir, ad Rab Meir. So there's a contradiction that was asked both in Rab Meir's opinion, V'rami, the Rab Yehuda, the Rab Yehuda. And there's also a contradiction in Rab Yehuda's opinion. Tanya, we learned in the Braisa as follows: Hamavashal b'Shabbos. A person cooked on Shabbos. B'shegig. He cooked on Shabbos and it was done b'shegig. Yoichal. He's allowed to eat it because it's only b'shegig, so therefore the person is allowed to eat it. And Rashi says this means even the person himself and even on Shabbos itself. But if it's b'mezid, if it was done b'mezid, then lo yoichal. Then he's not allowed to eat from this food. Okay, so now whether this refers to the person himself or it refers to the person himself, that he's not allowed to eat it. Rab Meir. So this is the opinion of Rab Meir. So right over here you see that Rab Meir holds that there's a knas for mezid and there's not a knas for shegig. Rabbi Yehuda says, b'shegig yoichal l'matzah Shabbos. Even b'shegig there's also a knas. And he's only going to be allowed to eat it on Matzah Shabbos. And it's talking about the person himself, that he himself will be allowed to eat it on Matzah Shabbos. And Rashi adds to this that Matzah Shabbos is only going to be B'chtei Sheyasu, which means you have to wait Matzah Shabbos as long as it would take to prepare this food. You can't eat it immediately Matzah Shabbos. Okay, because we don't want him to have anar from what he did on Shabbos. B'mezid lo yochal leilamis. But if he did it b'mezid, so then he cannot eat it forever, which could be referring either to the person himself or to anyone. So he should not be eaten forever. So here you see that Rabbi Yehuda holds that there's a knas for shegig and for mezid. Now there's a third opinion in this. Rabbi Yechanan Hasandla says, b'shegig yochal matzah Shabbos la'achedim. B'shegig it could be eaten matzah Shabbos, but only for others, not for the person himself that cooked it. V'loy he himself cannot eat from it. B'mezid lo yochal eilamis. And if it was done b'mezid, he shouldn't eat it forever. Loy v'loy lachedim. Not he himself and not others. So that actually brings up here from the Gemara and other places that explains that Rabbi Yechanan Hasandler holds that in this case when you cook on Shabbos, it's not awesome in midrabanan because of a knas, because you were over on a malacha on Shabbos, but it's awesome in atayra. He learns that from a pasuk that Maisa Shabbos is aser ba'achila. Okay, but now what do we see over here? Kashya, the Rab Meir, ad Rab Meir. There's a contradiction in Rab Meir's opinion. Before, Rab Meir did say that there's a knas by shegig got to mezid, and here regarding Shabbos, he says there's no knas. And Kashya, the Rab Yehuda, Rab Yehuda. And by Rab Yehuda, there's also a contradiction, the opposite. So the Gemara explains that Rab Meir, ad Rab Meir, loy Kashya. In Rab Meir's opinion, there's no contradiction here because ki konis b'derabbanan. The Rab Meir holds that the knas is only when there's the ism d'Rabbanan. And the reason is because it's only an ism d'Rabbanan, so people take it more lightly. So Chachamim were concerned that if you're going to allow it b'shegig, that he shouldn't have to pay for the damage, he may come to damage b'mezid. So there, Rab Meir holds that there is a knas for shegig and mezid. But minat Torah, which is much more severe in people's eyes, so here Rab Meir holds there's no knas for shegig. Fragt the Gemara, but v'ha menasech da'iraisahu, menasech which is minat Torah, the kakanis, And Rab Meir did apply the knas even for a shegig. So even though the actual payment for the menasech is only a knas midrabanan, but the menasech itself, if we learn like Rav, which menasech means to pour it for avodah zarah, which is a isam and so the action to do this is a isam and so why would you have to make a knas of shegig to mezid out of a concern that a person may do this b'mezid? It's a isam and So the Gemara answers, Mishum chumra da avodas kechavim koneslei. But on the other hand, because this is avodah zarah and this is so severe, so over here to be marchik a person from this, Rab Meir says the knas is for shegig and for mezid. That's Rab Meir's approach. The Rabbi Yehuda like Kashi, according to Rabbi Yehuda, there's no contradiction either because kiloi kones b'drabanan. Rabbi Yehuda says the exact opposite. When it comes to something which is only midrabanan, so because it's not as severe, so over here we don't make a knas for shegig and for mezid. It's only a knas for a mezid. But when it's a isam and atayre, cooking on Shabbos, over here it's more severe. So Chachamim were more stringent about this, so they made the knas for mezid and for shegig. Frek the Gemara v'hamenasech da'iraise v'loi kanis. But menasech, which is min atayre, and Rabbi Yehuda says that over there there's no knas for shegig or to mezid. And says the Gemara, he says an opposite svara. Mishum chumre davedes kechavim mivdo bedili minei. Because it's avodah zarah and it's so stringent in people's eyes, people separate from this, so we don't have to be concerned that people will do this b'mezid. Okay, let's finish this inyan. It's going to go down a little bit to the next amud over here, but this is a continuation in the subject here. And now here we can see that there's a contradiction in Rab Meir's opinion regarding this subject, whether we make the knas for the shegig as well because of the mezid. So there's a contradiction over here regarding a isam and atayre. So over here in this brayse it said that Rab Meir holds that min atayre there is no knas for shegig or to mezid when it comes to Shabbos. But here there's another brayse. The Tanya we learned in the brayse haneteya b'Shabbos. A person planted on Shabbos, another malacha. So b'shegig, if it was done b'shegig, yikayim. He can leave it and let it grow. B'mezid, if it was done intentionally, yaker. He has to uproot it. B'shviyes, if it was done in shmita, beim, so you're not allowed to plant in shmita, beim b'shegig, beim b'mezid. Either way, yaker. You have to uproot what you planted. Divrei Rab Meir, this is Rab Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says, b'shviyes, if it was done in shmita, so then I say, b'shegig yikayim, if it was done unintentionally, you can let it grow. B'mezid, intentionally, yaker, you have to uproot it. Well, b'Shabbos, if you plant it on Shabbos, then bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid yaker. Both b'shegig and b'mezid, you have to uproot it. So what's the question here? What do we see? What does Rab Meir say regarding a person that plants on Shabbos? He makes a distinction between b'shegig and b'mezid. That b'shegig yikayim and b'mezid yaker. So this is a contradiction in Rab Meir's opinion.
What Rab Meir said?
Huh?
Rab Meir said by Shabbos also.
Sorry. So the contradiction over here is from Shemitah. Yeah, the contradiction over here is from Shemitah that you see over here. Yeah, that's the contradiction. Correct. As Rashi explains here, the contradiction is from Shemitah. Good. That by Shemitah you see that both b'shegig and b'mezid you have to uproot it. So it's a contradiction in Rab Meir's opinion from Shemitah to the halacha of Shabbos. So the Gemara explains, well, the Taimei, you're asking a contradiction from the previous brayse, where Rab Meir said regarding cooking, that we make a distinction between shegig and mezid, to what it says here regarding shmita, that we don't make a distinction between shegig and mezid. So tikshalach hi gufa, there's a question here in the pshat of this brayse itself. Mechti, let's see, planting on Shabbos is isam and atayre, and planting in shmita is isam and atayre, maishna Shabbos and maishna shvius. What's the difference between Shabbos and Shemitah? Why by Shemitah did he make a distinction and by Shemitah he did not? So Ella, Hasam, Kedektani Taima. There, the reason for this distinction is as it's explained in another brayse. Rab Meir explained, why do I say that b'Shabbos, b'shegig yikayim, that if it was done b'shegig, he can let it grow. We're not so stringent about this. And b'mezid yaker, but if it was done b'mezid, only then it has to be uprooted. But b'shviyes, bein b'shegig and bein b'mezid yaker. But if a tree was planted in Shemitah, either way you have to uproot this tree. Their answer is because when it comes to a tree that's growing, people count to the year of when exactly it was counted. So Rashi explains when you plant a tree, so you have to know when is the 4th year or the 5th year when it's mutter to eat from the tree. The first 3 years are arla, then the 4th year is neta revai, and then the 5th year it's going to be mutter. So when you look at this tree, you're always going to have to count back and see when was this tree planted, and you're going to count back and see that it was planted in Shemitah. So when you're going to see that it was planted in Shemitah, this may come and lead people to say, oh, you're allowed to plant in Shemitah. Because they're going to count back and see that it was planted in Shemitah and they didn't have to uproot it. So that's why Chachamim made a special gzeira regarding Shemitah, that whether it's b'shegig, whether it's b'mezid, you have to uproot it. So there should never be a scenario that people should remember and say, this is a tree planted in Shemitah. But when you plant a tree, there's no reason to have to count back to the day when it was planted on Shabbos. People are not going to come back and realize that this is a tree that was planted on Shabbos. So if it was done b'shaygig, we allowed the tree to remain. Only b'meizit, you have to uproot it. That's the distinction according to Rav Meir. The Braisa says another pshat. Nechshedu Yisrael ala shviyas. The Yidden were suspected of not keeping Shemitah properly, so therefore regarding Shemitah we're more machmei that either way you have to uproot it. But v'lei nechshedu ala Shabbosis. The Yidden were not suspected for not keeping Shabbos, so there they did not make the knas for the mshegig like the mezid. So the Gemara explains, my davacher, why is this Braisa bringing a second shot? Hachi ka'amar, this is what the Braisa is saying. V'chi teimeh, if you'll argue and say, Shabbos nami, even regarding Shabbos as well, if we're using the svara that we said before regarding a tree planted in Shemitah, that sometimes you count back for a tree, regarding the arla to know when it was planted. So Zimnin, by Shabbos, it also could happen. It could happen that the Zimnin, the Mikla, Yom Lamed b'Shabbos, it could come out that the 30th day before Rosh Hashanah will be on Shabbos itself, the Inata Hahu Yaimeh, who the Salkele Shata, and if it was planted on Shabbos, so then the halacha is 30 days before the new year is the minimum amount of time that it should be considered to be like a full year. And then you can count it as 1 year for the planting of this tree. And v'iloi, and if it was not planted on Shabbos, if it was planted on Sunday, so then it's only 29 days, shata. It's not going to be a full year of the tree growing. So therefore, sometimes you do have to count the days, and you're going to realize that this tree was planted on Shabbos. And so people are going to come to think that, look, this tree was planted on Shabbos, and it could continue growing. So therefore, there could be the same leniency in people's eyes. So therefore, Tashema, the Braisa comes and says, Davarach, I'll give you a second shot why Shabbos is different than Shemitah, because Nechshtu Yisrael al Shviyas, Yidden were suspected of not keeping Shemitah properly, but Nechshtu al Shabbosis, and they weren't suspected regarding Shabbos. That's the second shot to explain Rab Meir's opinion. Now the Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda loy kashya. In Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, there's also no contradiction here. Rabbi Yehuda says the opposite. Rabbi Yehuda says that Dafke b'negei to Shemitah were more lenient, and when it comes to Shabbos, we're more stringent about this. And the reason is because ba'asred Rabbi Yehuda chamira luhu shviyas. Because in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, for people, they were very, very careful with Shemitah. And they were even more careful with Shemitah than b'negei to Shabbos. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, he says the opposite. That by Shemitah, we're not b'sheigig, you could let it grow because people were more careful with Shemitah. Dafke Shabbos, people were more lenient about. So over there, he was machmir both b'sheigig and memezet to uproot it. Tahud amalei lechaveiroi, in the place of Rabbi Yehuda. So someone said to his friend, Dayer bar Daisa, he called him a ger, the son of a Giyaitis, which he used this as a derogatory, he wanted to embarrass him. Amalei, so he responded to him and said, you calling me this way? Analei achli peiris the shviyas kavasech. I don't eat fruits from Shemitah like you do. So this is a person in the area where Rabbi Yehuda lived. So we see that they took pride in the fact that they kept Shemitah very well. So therefore he holds that when you get to Shemitah, we don't have to be so stringent about this.